Hello and welcome to today's WholeHearted Living podcast episode with your host Deb Thorpe. And today we are diving into the very useful but not widely spoken about topic of bridging the gap between where you currently are, where you want to be, and what happens when you're really in the midst of all of that. So let's do this. So I really wanted to bring this into a podcast episode because when we start talking about change and growth and development, as you can begin to see and understand through the various different topics we've tackled already in the podcast, that there is always going to be a part of our brain that resists change. Okay, so, whether you call that your little human self or your primal brain, there is always a part of your psyche that will inherently resist the change that you're wanting to make. Even if that change is for the better, it's ultimately going to lead to greater freedom and fulfillment and empowerment of you. So how do we navigate that time between realizing that we have maybe got some unhelpful patterns, or we want to change some of our thought processes and our mindset and our beliefs? So we're in the awareness stage of that and we're seeking to make that change, but that change is not yet fully embodied in us. So there's like this gap, and it can be a really, really difficult time. And I mean, I myself have got caught in this trap many times over the years, and it's probably one of like the biggest things that happens with clients when they begin to make, really positive changes in their life. And it's almost like that old self, those old patterns and those old beliefs really seem to ramp up in intensity. And if you don't understand what's going on during this time, it can feel really confusing and actually has the ability to pull you back into the old ways, into what's familiar, because, maybe you're telling yourself what this means. I've heard many people over the years talk about how, maybe what they dream and desire and what they're trying to bring in is not meant for them because, all of this old stuff is coming back up, or maybe they feel like the universe is challenging them in some way. And so, they then formulate a belief that it's not meant for them, it's not possible for them. And so they end up retreating back. And, I often use the analogy that this stage can feel very much like no man's land. So, you have had to move, or you've chosen to move out of the trenches, okay, where, it's far from ideal conditions, right? It's not comfortable. It's not, where you're going to thrive, but at least you're somewhat protected and it's familiar and there's, potentially other people around you. So, that's kind of representing your old self, if you like, what's familiar, what is to some extent comfortable, but it's not, and it's not where you're thriving. So you make the decision to leave the trench, and you're then heading into no man's land. Now, as you leave the trench, you will have an idea of what you're aiming for, right? You'll be able to potentially see where it is that you're wanting to get to. And, you've got that as your focus, but that bit in the middle is probably some of the most loneliest, isolated points that you can feel like sometimes, especially when you get to the middle of it, okay, where it's almost like you can feel the pull to go back into what's familiar and safe, but you also feel so much closer to where you want to be. And it's almost like, oh, you can feel quite stuck, and yeah, feeling like you don't quite know which way to go. It's a bit like you're damned if you go forward and you're damned if you go back. And it can be a really challenging time because you're still in the battleground at that point. The old self doesn't give up particularly easily unless you're going through like some really deeply, intensely emotional experience, in which case you might experience all of this happening really quickly. Like people who have a near-death experience, or they go through extreme loss, or something that is really deeply emotional, might make this process really, really quickly. But when we're going about our everyday life and we are making this choice to leave what is known and to some extent go into the unknown because we're aiming for a different version of ourselves or a different future, different thoughts and beliefs, that no man's land it can be so challenging. And I wanted to talk about this to normalize this process, because for a lot of people, because this isn't really openly talked about, they believe that when they're in it, there must be something wrong with them, or they're not doing it right, or that this isn't meant for them because they're experiencing all of these challenges and it's feeling really hard. And so I really wanted to talk about this today from a perspective of, this is the natural biology of change, if you like. That, the old self, that what is familiar, won't give up easily, typically, on this journey. So your human self, your primal self, will fight for what is familiar to you, even if that's not what's best for you, because that's safe and it's known, and from a survival point of view, that makes sense. Okay, it feels like it has control. Imagine yourself in the trenches, right? It's familiar, somewhat safe, certainly safer than being out in no man's land, and you can exert some sort of control. But the second you leave that, it makes sense that everything intensifies, right? If you imagine, the first time you've got to raise your whole entire body above the trench, and you don't know what's going to be there, and you don't know what's going to be coming at you, and you don't know what you're going to have to navigate on your way to get to the other side, it makes sense that at that moment, everything in your entire system is going to sound the alarm bells and tell you to get back to safety. It's going to tell you to get back to what is known. Okay. So, when we use this as an example, it makes more sense that there is going to be, at that point of deciding to make the change, that there is going to be almost like this swell of desire, and this feels really strong and intense at times, of your whole entire system wanting to pull you back. Okay. And it's like, if for anyone who's read Birdsong as a book, absolutely phenomenal book. I read that when I was in college, and it just had such a profound impact on me. And it talks about World War I and the trenches in their experience. For any of those soldiers that had to go over the top of the trench, right, and go into no man's land, all they could do was focus on where they had to get to. Like, that had to be their primary focus and driver. Otherwise, they would have never have made it, right? They wouldn't have even left the trench. So that's what I want you to bear in mind when you are embarking on this journey, is that at that point when you've gone over the top of the trench and you're entering no man's land and you feel all of your system almost going into high alert, take a breath, understand that this is natural, this is all part of change, this is what your body is going to do, it's all okay, and you are going to keep your focus and your intention on what you are aiming for. Whatever change that might be, whether it's embarking on a new spiritual or physical practice in your life, whether it's developing a habit of self-love, of deepening your self-acceptance, whether it's changing some of your beliefs to better support yourself. Okay, whatever it is that you are aiming for, you need to keep that front and focused in your mind. Okay, so always have that as your goal. I want you to imagine, you were going through no man's land. You want to be that focused on the destination, what you're aiming for, because what you're going to is the other side of it. So when you're then in no man's land, it makes it easier to navigate it because you know ultimately what you're aiming for. So therefore, whatever obstacle, whatever unexpected thing arises in that time, you can see that as a almost like a challenge to help you to grow into what you need to be when you get to the other side. So, for example, it's not uncommon for people when they decide to increase, they want to experience more love in their life. Okay, they want to be more loving to themselves. They want to be in a deeply loving, connected relationship. They set that as the goal. Okay, that's what they're aiming for, and they embark on some of those daily practices. It's not uncommon that there'll then arise situations where maybe somebody who's not particularly loving appears in their life, or they suddenly come up against a situation where they are uncovering an area where they're not living towards themselves and they're really highly critical. Now, that they are all opportunities for you to deepen your own healing, deepen your own journey, and equip yourself then with everything that you need for when you reach the other side. Because ultimately, I talk about the goal of getting to the other side here, just to use this analogy, but fundamentally it's not how it works internally, as in the journey is the thing that then creates that goal that we are working towards. So if we're wanting more abundance, more freedom, more success, more love in our life, and we're currently feeling almost the exact opposite of that, it makes sense that along the journey of getting there, we are going to repeatedly come up against situations and be invited into challenges and potential obstacles that will invite us to heal, shift, change, challenge different aspects of ourselves, so that when we arrive, we are the embodiment of all of those things that we are aiming for. It's not like we arrive at the place and then we go, oh, okay, I've made it through no man's land now. Now I get to just magically convert into all the love and abundance and everything else that I want. No, it's the journey. And so what we get to do is see our experience of like this gap as invitations to become the embodiment of the exact things that we are aiming for through this journey. And it's so transformative. You know, if you've ever heard people talk about shadow work, inner child work, like the transformation that happens, like transforming our pain, that all of this work happens in this gap. So rather than believing that when you embark on a journey of change that it is going to be like skipping out into the sunset filled with rainbows and sparkles, and you've made the decision now, so the pathway is going to be lined for you, and any challenge to that means that it's not meant for you. No, that's not how it works. You will be invited to heal, maybe even accept, send love, compassion, whatever it is that you need, you will be invited to in various different forms as you embark on this journey. Okay, so, and it shows up in all kinds of ways. You know, I think the universe is like the most creative force, and so this can show up in so many different ways. So no doubt you will have had experience of this in your own life, right? Where you set yourself a new goal or a new challenge, or you're almost like, okay, now I'm going to my next level. And then it feels like your world starts to unravel, or you suddenly come up against all of these things and you're like, what on earth is going on? Like, I'm wanting this thing, and yet the exact opposite seems to be appearing. So rather than getting caught in those challenges, recognize them as invitations for you to deepen whatever it is you need to within yourself, heal, integrate, transform, alchemize, whatever it is that needs to happen in that moment. Allow that to happen so that you can carry on your journey. And what becomes amazing about this is that it's not like a linear thing of I start and I'm in this place, and then I have to wait until I get to the other side to feel all these things. Of course, it becomes a cumulative effect. So it's almost like you gather the resources and the treasures along the way, so that you're continually building towards, the greater love, abundance, freedom, fulfillment that you might be looking for. So hopefully that makes sense, and hopefully that analogy clarifies some of this process, because the gap, well, the no man's land, is some of the most challenging terrain we will find ourselves in. I'm in a future podcast episode, I'm going to dive into another analogy of another time in our lives when we can experience quite a huge challenge, and that can be around our greatness. And so we dive into the analogy of mountain and nature. So that's like another big challenge that we can find ourselves in. But this one is specifically to when we almost like have become aware of our unhelpful patterns, where we want to change, the baggage we've been carrying around, the beliefs that we want to change. So we've got the awareness of that. So, I often think, it feels like a blessing and a curse sometimes that we can't unknow what we know. So once you become aware and you know these things, you can't unknow them, right? So you can't go back to just pretending that you don't know any of this stuff anymore. So, maintain your goal as your focus, what it is that you're aiming for, and take the step into no man's land, trusting that whatever challenges and obstacles you face, they are invitations for you to heal, process, integrate whatever it is you need to fully embody the very thing that you're aiming for. And it just, I don't say that this makes it any easier to go through it. Sometimes these can be quite obvious little challenges. Other times this is going to call us deep. It depends on what the ultimate goal is here. However, knowing this and having this overview allows us to have a slightly different relationship with that. So rather than us questioning what's meant for us, all of these obstacles and all of these challenges must mean that, this is not possible for me. And, I thought I was making all this progress and clearly I'm just going back, and all of the self-doubt and the questioning can start to come in. Rather than us getting caught in all of that, I most imagine it's like, we find ourselves getting caught up in some barbed wire, like in no man's land. And it's like, we feel then very stuck. And rather than doing that, we get to continue to have this bird's eye perspective. So, keeping in touch with that goal is a bit like having a bird's eye perspective of that battlefield. And so there's always a part of you that is maintaining that bird's eye perspective that can then guide you as you go through it. And it just makes it a lot easier, so you can navigate around the barbed wire, or maybe, you go through a whole process that enables you to transform that barbed wire into, I don't know, something that, like a whole bush of flowers and stuff that is going to then provide this amazing habitat for others. Like, this is where we get to play with our imagination and use it in a way that supports us. So that's also one thing that helps us as we're going through this period, this gap, is maintaining a connection to our higher self. I talk about this a lot in episode 4, I think it is, where I talk about navigating change and how our human self is going to freak, and it's going to get caught in all of the physical things that are happening because that's its primary focus. Okay, it's doing its job to the best of its ability, right? We can't punish it for that. It's trying. But the human self will get us caught in that cycle and keep us in that because that's familiar and known. And so we have to keep that focus on and our connection to our higher self, to our intuition, to, imagining we've got that bird's eye perspective on that situation, because that's going to be the thing that navigates us through it in like the most beneficial, effective path for us. So hopefully that's giving you a couple of very practical insights into this bridging the gap. And in future episodes we'll keep diving into the different things that we can utilize that helps to almost like shrink the time on that gap and what it is to be in no man's land. And also, for as much as we walk this journey on our own, and we know that, we understand that we are the only ones truly in our internal world who can do the work and create the change that we want. Please do reach out and seek support from others on the journey, or other people who can definitely help keep you connected to your higher self whilst you're going through this stage, because it will make it easier for you. Okay, it will help to shorten the time gap that you're in that. And this isn't about someone else coming in and telling you, okay, this is now what you need to do. It's about having that support around you that helps to keep you connected to your internal higher self, because that's that's ultimately your bird's eye perspective. That is what is going to, highlight the best possible route through for you. So on that note, I have felt really prompted over the last week to design a brand new container called the Dream Lodge, and it's purely for this. Okay, so we're going to be working specifically with keeping you in touch with your higher self, with your innate inner wisdom. We're going to meet for a monthly circle together online where we'll go through practices to deepen the connection that you have with yourself. It allows space for the support for you to keep on the path and the journey so that you don't feel alone in it, and you certainly don't feel so isolated, and joining with others on the path. There's real power in hearing about other people's experiences of this journey, for sure. And that's such an immensely powerful thing to do within like a sacred circle, right, of where it's safe and people can come together all with this same very heart-centered intention. So I'm going to lead that space, but it's very much going to be co-created with everyone who is part of it. We're going to keep it quite small in the beginning, and it is going to be a space for harnessing and really embodying your enoughness, your worthiness, your innate unconditional love. This is going to be where you tap in and embody all of this for yourself. And I am going to create and introduce different tools and techniques into this space, depending on where the group's at and what they need. So it's going to be very, very, a really co-created space, and it's going to feel such a collective of people that come together. So we're going to do all of this online, and I'm launching it at the moment. I've started it with it being invite only. It's going to be a very small space, so I will include the link in the description of this podcast. And if you are interested and would love to find out more, please do click the link, and you can also contact me directly through that as well. So if you're feeling that call to develop that connection with your innate inner wisdom, your intuition, your higher self, you know that getting caught up in your human self, your primal self, is, you've been there and done that, and it's keeping you stuck and keeping you trapped and keeping you in a cycle, and you're wanting to deepen your connection with that innate wisdom that is in you, then this is the space for you. It's only £37 or €37 a month, and there's no ongoing commitment to it. You can jump in. Let's build this really amazing space together, and I really do invite you into what is going to be such a beautiful, special, and an amazing collective space. So I'm going to leave you with that as the invitation for today. Do let me know your thoughts on this bridging the gap, and if thinking about it in this way has really helped to shift your perspective of what it's like to be in that battleground between, almost like your old self and your new self. Okay, so there's my invitation for you today. Thank you so much for sharing this space with me. I am truly, truly loving serving and extending my own creativity in this way and connecting in this way. So if you're finding this helpful, please do share. Make sure that you're subscribed as well so that you don't miss any episodes. And I'll be back with you with more wholehearted living info very soon. Bye for now.